Hi, a very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. The webinar today is part of the Smart Nation Together channel organized by the Smart Nation and Digital Government Office. If you'd like to find out more about the other free webinars that we are offering, do visit the link that I have pasted in the chat box below. I'm Cheryl and for SNDGO, and I'll be your host for this session. Today, we are very privileged to have with us our speaker, Aditya, the founder and CTO of X-Altus Private Limited. Aditya has more than 10 years in the various domains such as data science, machine learning, and computer vision, and he'll be bringing us through today's seminar, Data Analytics for a Smart Nation. Feel free to post any questions that you have for Aditya during the webinar at the Q&A section, and he will get to them at the end. Now over to you, Aditya.
All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for the introduction, and a very good afternoon to everybody attending this webinar today. So one of the hot topics today, which all of us are hearing about from our fellow peers, from our colleagues in the organization, from our friends, is about data analytics and how it affects the movement of a nation towards becoming smart. And to shed some light on that topic, through this webinar, I'm going to take you through how data analytics affects and frames a smart nation. Right? As Cheryl already introduced me earlier, I am one of the founders and CTO of X-Altus Private Limited. And the reason I'm speaking to you here is because I have been in this space of data analytics and data science, have seen it evolve. And I'd like to share how those experiences that I've gone through can help you on your journey ahead, and how, in terms of creating a smart nation, this is a very, very useful factor and a very big contributing factor. Over the next 90 minutes or so, I'm going to talk a little bit about what data analytics is. I'm going to talk about the importance of data analytics for a smart nation, because it's important to shed light on how analytics affects things around us today. We'll talk about the current data analytics practices in the industry. So where do you see it in the industry today? Where is it being used? Further, we'll get an opportunity to look at a small glimpse of some demos on how different data analytics tools can help you as an individual or you working for an organization. What's in store ahead for data analytics? And towards the end, we'll see how you can go about adopting this for your organization or for yourself. And we'll end up with Q&A across the last 15 or 20 minutes. And as Cheryl mentioned earlier, please do share your questions on the Q&A, and I'll get to them towards the end of the webinar. Now, before I get into it, let's start off with a very fundamental question or a very fundamental thought of why we are even talking about this today. And the only reason we're doing so is because today, the amount of data that is being generated has become a very valuable commodity for everyone to talk about. Right? If data was not so valuable, people wouldn't be talking about it. So what's hitting at us today, or what's hitting us today, is an asteroid of data, right? And we need to seek all of your help in trying to tackle this asteroid, to try and figure out how we're going to deal with this slaughter of data that's coming our way. Now, stats from a couple of years ago, and this has changed since then, says that data being generated on a daily basis is enormous, right? 2.5 quintillion bytes of data is not a number that you'll want to get in the way of. So over the years, not only has this number increased, but it is also projected that this is going to continue increasing exponentially in the future. Now, where's the hurdle, right? The hurdle is that along with the increase in the volume of data, the velocity or the speed at which data is coming in is also increasing. So if I show you a snapshot of data coming in real time, only from sources such as social media, e-commerce, social media, social messaging apps, and so on, you'll see it's an enormous amount of data generated within a short period of time. Now, this influx is what we are trying to deal with, and we are trying to come up with techniques to tackle this problem. So That being said, what is the one question that every individual or data or organizations are asking today, right? They're asking, what can we do with the data, right? Well, to be very honest with you, organizations and people have been sitting on data for a long time, right? And I'm sure that you'll agree with me on that. People started collecting data a few years ago, uh, probably not knowing what the end goal would be, or in some cases, they knew partially what they wanted to do with it. Now, as an organization or individual, there are certain things that you could possibly do with the data to kind of gain some value from it. If not, what's the point of going through all the trouble, right? Now, the first thing that you could possibly do, which could be beneficial, is to take a very simple approach, which is to explore the data, right? Exploration is nothing but a process of taking the data, saying, hey, I'm going to take you head on, and trying to find out what it's talking to you about. Now, as a process of doing that, what you're going to hope to achieve is you'll hope to achieve certain things or certain insights based on which you can then carve out some decisions for yourself or for the organization. Now, further to that, what you could also possibly do is say, hey, I want to have a high level look at the data just so that it can speak to me, and I then can speak to my stakeholders, my C-level executives, my managers on what the data is talking to me about. And that's where you can use various tools available to create things like reports and dashboards, which can be beneficial for everybody. One of the most important things that organizations are evolving to do today is use the data to make predictions or derive inferences from the data. Now, this is particularly important because every organization wants to know what the future holds for them, right? A lot of us as individuals, just speaking with an analogy, a lot of us individuals go to soothsayers or the people who can, tell us a little bit about what's going to happen based on reading some certain astrological signs or reading our hand and stuff like that, right? Now, that habit did not go away, and we still want to know, but now even organizations want to know, everybody wants to know. So doing this is very important because it helps an organization stabilize how they're going to plan for the future and how they're going to be prepared for what's to come. Right? And hence, these are important things that you can do with the data. Right? But the question then becomes, how do all this connect with moving towards a smart nation? Or how does all this even start off? How am I going to get geared up in order to do all of these things? And that's what the next few slides are going to try and tell us, right? We're going to start by trying to get an understanding of what data analytics is. Now, it's a very, very small term, but very powerful, right? And, just as a funny comic strip on your screen, you can even see that decisions that are being taken today in the fantasy world are also being based on the data. For example, you see this image, Santa saying, hey, I have crafted this gift for you based on data-driven insights from your wish history, right? So that's the extent to which data can be useful and data is becoming useful. Now, a very raw definition of data analytics says that it's nothing but trying to find out what the data is telling you. Right? In more technical terms, it's nothing but deciphering meaningful patterns in data. And the main reason why you're going to do this is so that it can help you with effective decision making. Right? Now, let's take a very simple example of our home. Right? We probably go on a Sunday, we open our fridge, we analyze what's in there, and we say, hey, it's time to head to Fair Price today because we need to get A, B, and C. Now, that's a very small level of analysis that you're doing, but it's still analysis. What you're getting by looking at the fridge is data, and what you're doing with that data is analyzing it. Now, the same way when we take it up a notch and we say, hey, I want to apply this concept into my workplace, into my day-to-day activities, that's when you need to know how this affects things at large and how do you go about doing it. We've all seen a lot of different examples around us of things that happen that are based on analytics, right? Very simple examples being things like Google Maps. We use it on a day-to-day basis. It tells us things like how long it's going to take to reach from one place to the other, what are the different routes available, how long would it take on different routes, whether there's traffic or not, and so on. We have seen weather forecasts, right? We have seen that, okay, it's going to be rainy today. I can't go for a barbecue, so on and so forth. Those who like to invest in stocks keep a track of, what the market is telling you, how, the stocks are going to go, whether it's going to go up, down, or it's just going to stay as it is. So all these things, consciously or unconsciously, you're looking at is using some form of analytics to give you an answer or helping you make a decision, right? Now, the idea is that whenever we are working with analytics, we are working with data, right? And we all know that data is of a form which is not given to us on a silver platter, right? It's not like somebody's coming us and telling us, hey, this is the most valuable data that is existing on the planet. Here, take it and take decisions. It's very unstructured, as you can see from this illustration here. And what analytics helps you do is that it helps you structure the information better so that you can put together what we call decisions, right? That's what you're trying to do. Now, this process applies to different areas of the industry. This process applies to your day-to-day workplace life, day-to-day life outside the workplace, and also in helping out organizations as a whole in moving a nation to being smart, right? Why? Because you're effectively trying to structure information to take decisions. But the question then, is why are we talking about smart nation today? What is all this analytics and data science, and why is it that it's becoming talk of the town? Well, to be very honest with you, it's not something which is new, right? Analytics has been around from donkey years, right? People who first started working with analytics, let's say 4 decades back, 3 or 4 decades back, worked with it in a very, very simple form, right? Where the main idea was to utilize whatever information that was at their disposal at that point in time. And minded, it wasn't at the scale we have it today. But the main goal was to try and figure out what the data was telling you. That's it. And people are very content with knowing what the data was telling you, right? It's like opening your fridge and seeing, okay, today we don't have this, we don't have this. That's it. As technology matured, as the amount of data started increasing, as techniques started being figured out, we started becoming more curious about things, and we tried to find out ways to get more information from the data. And that's where we then try to answer the question of why did something happen? So along with talking about the what, we then started talking about the why, right? Now you want to know, okay, if my data is telling me XYZ, why is it telling me XYZ? What's the cause behind the effect? Now today, as we are getting closer, with technology, we're getting an influx of data. We've started going into things that help us analyze the data more closely, talks about the future, and helps us to optimize that. Hence, we're talking about questions like, what's going to happen in the future? Can I optimize what's going to happen in the future? And organizations today, the whole nation today is trying to find a way to make the situation better for everybody, right? And that's what analytics can help you do. Now, if we look at something known as the hype cycle for analytics, right, from Gartner. So Gartner is a service which provides you with technologies that are, popular today, with insight into what's going to happen with these technologies and so on. So from one such report obtained in July 2021, you can see that a lot of various analytical methods, methodologies, techniques, terms are in this hype cycle. And what this indicates is that these are things which are upcoming today. These are things which people are going towards today. So things like data analytics for good, things like natural language generation, data storytelling, analytics governance, decision intelligence, right? Graph analytics. All these things are things where people are trying to work towards these things. And these are the things that we should be on the top of today as well. So we should have the know-how, we should have the capability to work with these things. And that's what's going to help an organization and smart nations become smarter, right? So that's the main idea. Now, when we talk about data analytics, a question which all organizations ask is it something which is very simple, right? Is it a one-step process? Is it something all organizations can do? Well, the question is all organizations can do it, but they have to follow a very strict methodology of how we can approach a data analytics problem, right? Now, if you look at this diagram here, I'm going to take you through this very quickly. It primarily tells you that any analytics solution always starts with a problem, right? If you don't have a problem, there's no solution. And the same goes for an individual, for an organization, for a smart nation, for a smart world, right? It doesn't matter that you're doing analytics. It matters why you're doing it. Only once you know the problem at hand, right, will you then be able to start designing the solution, develop the solution, and then further go on to monitoring it, and then talk about, hey, has this solution been successful? I wanted to bring about a change in my organization. Is it working, right? And only then can you say, okay, whatever I've done has worked. And this is the workflow of analytics. And every organization, every individual needs to know how to go through this workflow. Now, how does this fit into the Smart Nation initiative? Or how does this help in Smart Nation building, right? We've spoken a little bit about what analytics is. Now, if we talk about what a smart nation is, and if you just pay attention to the keywords that have been highlighted on this particular slide, then you can understand that a smart nation is nothing but empowering people and businesses. So pay close attention to the fact that it's both people and businesses by providing them increased access to data. Why? Because data is a very valuable commodity, as we just saw. And that happens through the contribution of innovative ideas, utilizing technology, and all this is done so that the result of the solution that is created from analytics is reciprocated back to the people, right? It is beneficial to everybody at large. So carving out a smart nation requires all these things: data, innovative ideas, technology, and empowerment of people and businesses. And the challenges that are faced in this process are up on this slide here for you to see, right? What are some of those challenges? Firstly, it's design cost, for example, right? Because why? Thinking about a solution takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of effort. And if people are not empowered to do it, then it will be very difficult. Things like putting it into effect, operation efficiency, again, is a very big challenge. And you would have noticed that through all the initiatives that are being taken, it takes a lot of time from ideology to putting it into effect. And if you go through all these different things here, what you'll find is one of the design challenges is the data volume, right? Is the security of the data, is reliable communication. The reason is because, as we spoke about very early on, the amount of data that we have today is enormous. And what's important is to know how we can overcome this challenge in order to better contribute in suppressing some of the design challenges for a smart city. And that's where data analytics can help to a certain extent, right? Now, let me just talk through how data analytics can help a smart nation, or how it can help all the different organizations to make better use of what they have. Now, if you pay attention to this slide, you'll see that the slide has 4 different keywords from the center, and then it branches out into other things. Let me explain it. It all starts with the data at the north here, right? Now you move slowly towards the right or clockwise from there. What you'll see is that analytics is a key driver of working with the data, right? Further, you'll see that what analytics helps with is to help these organizations derive certain valuable insights from that, which can then be translated into action. So the question then becomes, where does all this data come from, and what is the action that, for example, we have to take? Now, the data that a smart nation needs to collect in order to perform data analytics effectively is obtained from various different systems that you see here. Things like city sensors, things like public data markets, things like city machines and equipment. And you all are very familiar with a city like Singapore, for example, where all around the city, you have different devices, for example, collecting data. And how is this helping? This is helping the government take different decisions based on what they collect, take actions based on what they find. Now, what is important in this whole cycle of enabling data analytics for a smart nation is that all this data is highly secure and is authentic when doing this analysis, right? Because if not, there could be something wrong in the process, organizations wouldn't benefit, people wouldn't get the best solution out of it. But it's also to note that doing this process is not easy. As a part of going from data to action, it takes a lot of work, right? You got to make sure your data is managed. You got to make sure that your data is enriched with enough value, that it is integrated with the right systems, that you're able to find the right solution, and you're able to integrate that with the people. Now, doing all of this, as we know, takes effort, takes time, and that's why empowerment of people and businesses are required. So in order to build a smart nation, businesses and organizations need to become smarter, and all us individuals need to be contributors by becoming the smartest, right? And we need to go back this chain in order to build a smart nation. Now, it all starts from organizations trying to be data driven, right? Now, notwithstanding the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic actually accelerated the data-driven requirement or the needs of an organization, organizations would have eventually gotten there. But that's the very first step if somebody wants to adopt things like analytics as part of becoming smart. Now, how do organizations become data-driven, right? Organizations become data-driven by, number one, finding out that they do have problems within the organization and they need certain requirements that need to be gathered from the data, right? That is very, very pivotal and important. Secondly, they can become data driven by starting to find means to manage the data. And one of the key problems that everybody is having today is that because there was such a sharp rise in the volume and the velocity of data, organizations found it very, very difficult to start adapting to this, explosion, right? And if you see, a lot of organizations are still at the stage where they're trying to build their data management solution to be effective enough to handle this data in order to do analytics, right? And lastly, team enablement is very important. So an organization is nothing without its people, right? If people do not know how to work with data, how to manage, how to analyze, then what's the use of even doing all of these things, right? So to become data driven, these are three very, very pivotal things, right? And this is one of the many operating models that exist out there, but very fundamental in nature. Now, the benefit of doing this would be that, number one, organizations would be able to take better decisions. Number two is that they would have more accessibility to analytics. Why? Because now you have data managed, you have people who are capable, right? Number three, it can start paving the way for things like automation. A big part of doing data analytics is being able to gather the right data. And automation is a key tool or a part of that, right? Lastly, it could also help in things like predictive modeling, right? And when we talk about predictive modeling, we're talking about how organizations can become future-proof, future-ready. Now, as part of this whole enablement process for organizations, they could use diverse technologies to do it, right? Tools which help them with analytics, tools which help them with things like automation, machine learning, it could be things like blockchain, so on and so forth, but for different purposes. And how does this benefit individuals? Well, if people are empowered, then obviously what they would be able to do is, number one, they would be able to use their new skills to add more value and credibility to the process, to the organization, right? Number two, they would be able to provide a larger coverage because people would then know how to handle simple to complex tasks, right? And at the end of the day, what they would provide for is a better understanding and a better sense of enablement of the data, or better sense of use of the data for the organization. So if organizations start becoming data driven, that's where individuals will benefit, and hence it works both ways. The organizations will benefit as well. Now, Singapore has a Smart Nation framework, or Smart Nation initiative, as you all know. And as part of this Smart Nation initiative, they've designed a framework which talks about how Singapore can start working towards, or is working towards, becoming a smart nation, right? And what you would see across all the different strategic priorities or pillars are that in every one of those pillars, be it to digitalize industries, be it to integrate ecosystems, or create digital or industrialization of digital technologies, what's common is the process of becoming digital, right? And across all these pillars, you will notice that it concentrates both on the businesses, saying that, okay, the sectors, the organizations, they need to be digitally enabled. And also that people and the ecosystem needs to have this sense of digital enablement. And that's where a nation can start growing together, right? And the enablers to do that, if you see, is nothing but talent. Firstly, if there's no talent, none of these things can be done. There cannot be research and innovation. There can't be standardization. There cannot be infrastructure set up. So talent is key to all these things. And it's organizations and the nation which can drive this. So it's a two-way street, right? At the end of doing all of this, when organizations and people start becoming empowered, then all these pillars, they start growing into making Singapore a smart nation, right? Helping Singapore reinvent its ways, strategies, digital strategies to deal with things. And you would have seen over the past 10 years, past 5 years, a lot of these new things have started coming up, right? And the reason is because people have started becoming empowered within the country. Organizations are starting to take initiatives within the country, and that's going to help the nation become a smart nation at large. Now, if we talk about some of the current practices in the industry, right? And when we talk about the industry, we're talking about different sectors of the industry, right? It could be pharmaceutical and medicine. It could be banking and finance. It could be construction and manufacturing. It could be retail, logistics, education, so on and so forth. But what we are seeing across all of these sectors is that there's starting to be a shift in the way things are being approached, right? For example, if we talk about banking and finance, right? We would have noticed that over a period of time, let's say, take an example of a bank like DBS, for example. You would have noticed that, okay, they started off with things like, digital tokens, right? Now they've said, okay, we're going to get rid of the physical device and we're going to go digital by using the app as a digital token itself. And the reason is because they could enable their business and the people to adapt to become more digital, right? If we talk about things like manufacturing and construction, we talk about, automation within these sectors, then you will notice that a lot of different processes within factories, within manufacturing centers are starting to get automated to a certain extent, right? People are analyzing how data is being generated. People are using this data to make the process better. When we talk about, education at large, you will see that, especially now that people have started to realize that, hey, data is important, and also that digital literacy is something which everybody should know. A lot of content and learning methodologies have become more adaptive in nature, right? You will see recommendations coming to you. You will see things being thrown at you as to, hey, this is what you should be learning. Medicine, you all know there's been a lot of innovation in that department. So all of these things are there. It's just that not every organization is able to get to that stage. Now, I know you all can't write on the chat, but you all can think about this in your head, right? You can think about, hey, have I seen one or the other analytics case before? And if so, just think about it, right? Think about it and just, notice the fact that you will understand these are very common things happening around us today, right? The inclusion of digital systems, the inclusion of analytics to a certain extent, and so on. And if I give you some examples that organizations are using today within themselves, they are using it for purposes such as credit risk analysis. Let's say a bank wants to prevent credit risk. It doesn't want to give loans to people who they know won't pay back or who they know are going to be at a risk of paying. They want to try to avoid such situations. Hence, what do? Today, while giving you credit cards, for example, they have an evaluation process, right? They ask you, hey, do you fulfill this criteria or evaluation? Only if so, you will be eligible for taking a credit card. The reason is because they want to try to analyze before they commit to something. Hey, is it something that you would be capable of doing or capable of taking on? Similarly, if you talk about various industries like microfinance, right? And we're not getting into the details, but what they want to target, if you just look at the headings here, is they want to use analytics to do things like figuring out whether a customer will default in a payment, in anything related to the financial institution. They try to figure out how I can increase my customer retention rate, right? So if you're with DBS Bank today, how does DBS Bank ensure that you're going to stick with them and not transition to another bank like UOB or OCBC or any other one, right? That's what data is helping them do. If we look at insurance companies, a lot of insurance industries are using data analytics to determine fraud, right? Be it in underwriting, be it in claims. They're using various analytical techniques in order to figure it out. And this is primarily because they figured out or they found out there's a problem. And this is not only in a certain country of the world, but all across. That if people are taking it or filing for an insurance claim, a lot of them are doing so fraudulently, right? Hence, analytics has come in to help. Sales and marketing, right? And this is something that we're all close to. With 11/11 around the corner, we all know that e-commerce, sales and marketing has become very data-driven today. We see not only all these e-commerce apps are giving us recommendations of things to buy, or they're targeting us, but even social media has started to become, use data analytics to hit us with things, right? So these are certain things that every single smart nation, every single organization, every single individual is encountering today. And what are we doing? We are trying to, ride this bandwagon to say that, hey, let's make all such sectors of the industry smart, such that as a nation, as a world, we all start to use analytics better. Now, the question then becomes that how do organizations start using analytics, or how do they go about doing analytics? Now, this is a question which everybody's asking. This is a question which every individual, every organization asks. Like, hey, how do I carve myself a pathway of going about doing something like this? Now, when organizations first start thinking about doing this, they are at a stage where they're doing a lot of things manually, right? And they say that, hey, I'm going to start using a combination of tools and manual processes to start filling the gap. And when we talk about various tools that exist in the market today to go about doing data analytics in particular, it's a huge number, right? And this is just one chart showing you a list of some of the tools available out there. Again, presented by Gartner, and this has been obtained from a Feb 2021 source, right? Now, a lot of you would not have even heard of half these tools, and I myself probably wouldn't be familiar with using some of them. But what is good to know is the fact that there is an availability for every individual and every organization to start using these things, right? Now, depending on what state the organization is at, their capability to invest in people, their capability to invest in its processes, they would then pick a tool which is comfortable for them, for the organization, and start using that to give them more value, or start trying that so that they can see what value can be derived out of it. So if you look at this particular chart here, you will see that, a lot of popular names that like Microsoft, like Tableau, like Amazon Web Services, like Google, for example, Oracle, for example, are up here. And the reason they're up here is because they are trying to provide organizations and people with tools which can help them do data analytics and help them do business intelligence, data science, work with data better, right? So organizations have to choose based on their capability what they want to go for. They can use this chart as a benchmark to know that, hey, Microsoft is one of the leaders of tools like this. Why? Because the capability of the tools provided by Microsoft could possibly be not only for exploration, but also for data manipulation, for data warehousing, for storing data, for being able to create very good reports, for doing predictions, and so on, right? There could be some other tools, right? For example, like pyramid analytics, which maybe not a lot of people have heard of. But when you dive into it, maybe you find out that, hey, this tool is very capable of doing something for a particular industry, right? For example, Click, right? It's something that was used by a lot of financial, or is being used by a lot of financial organizations because they found it very efficient for their line of work. So these are different, these are different tools and methodologies that organizations adopt. Now, outside what you see on the chart, people today have also started to use things like programming, open source tools, right? You hear a lot of these names like Python, R, MATLAB, C, C++, Java. Now, what are all these things and how do they aid in the process of analytics, right? So all these different programming tools, as they call it, are also other ways that an organization can adopt if they want more flexibility in how they want to go about doing analytics, right? If they want to tap on to more advanced skills and more advanced techniques to perform more in-depth analytics, data analytics. And hence today you hear a lot of these terms, today in the market, and everybody's talking about it. Now, in line with that, what I'm going to try today over the next maybe 15 minutes or so is I'm going to try to show you a small glimpse of 3 of these tools, right? And the reason I'm choosing these 3 tools is primarily because these are something which are starting to become more common in the organization. Also, these are tools which are highly flexible in nature, right? So what am I going to show you today? Now I'm going to show you certain small demos on 3 tools, as I said. 2 tools belonging to the tool track, or things which do not require programming, namely Excel and Power BI. And secondly, a tool which is in the programming track, primarily for doing data analytics, making predictions, and so on, which is Python, right? The first 2 tools come from the Microsoft suite, Excel and Microsoft Power BI. They're both from the Microsoft suite. And Python, as you all know, is an open source programming language that is becoming very, very popular in the industry today. So what am I going to try to show you with these tools, right? Firstly, with Excel, I'm going to try to show you an example of, hey, if I have some data with me, let's say, which is coming from a financial institution, right? In particular, let's say a loans department of a financial institution, then how can you as an analyst make use of that data in order to derive some useful insights, right? In order to make some small scale predictions, for example. Secondly, when we talk about the second tool, which is Microsoft Power BI, I'm going to show you there how a tool like Microsoft Power BI can be useful in creating reports and dashboards that you can show your stakeholders, your C-level executives, and so on. And in this case, I'm going to take an example of a retail organization to do that. So let's say you were, leading the analytics team of a retail organization. Then how would using a tool like this help? Right? And lastly, I'm going to also take you through how programming in Python can be used to do some predictions. And as part of this, I'm going to take you through a small example. Hopefully, it's not very complicated to understand. I'll try to keep it simple, of how telecom operators, telecom organizations, for example, Singtel and StarHub, how do they know when or you might possibly leave them and go to another telco operator, right? How can they figure out whether you are a potential churn for that particular organization, right? And many a times it often is the case, right? We see, there's an offer from somewhere else, and the next minute you see that there's an offer being offered to you by your telco provider. Coincidence? Not really. So in order to show these three, I'll be navigating through those three different tools: Excel, Power BI, and Python. And through those, I'll try to show you a few things. Hopefully that might be useful and help you get a head start on trying to pick it up. So give me 20 seconds and let me get to that. And in the meantime, what I want you to think about is how you use these tools today. If you are, how do you use these tools today in the organization, right? Okay. So hopefully, I've just tried to switch my screen, and hopefully you should be seeing my Excel sheet at the moment, right? I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see a little bit better. Now, let's assume for the first demo that you have an organization that is a financial organization, and they have enlisted you as the analyst of that financial organization to do a pilot program of how you can use Excel to build up some very, very quick analytical report and do some forecasting to help the organization figure out a summary of their customers and a summary of how they have been acquiring loans, how the progress has been. And they've given you a small subset of the data in order to deal with that. Now, remember one thing, that for an organization, the data can come from any source, right? For example, if you are an SME, you would possibly choose to store data within Excel CSV. You could possibly choose to store data within SQL databases, notepad files. It could be anywhere. But at the end of the day, what matters is that you're able to use that data in a structured manner to do analytics, right? So to get into that, so assume that we've gone through that process and gotten it to a form where we have a few different kinds of data, right? Now, since this is a loans department, we need to have information, number one, about the customer, right? And also about the loans. And that's what we precisely have. So if you see the top part here that I'm highlighting on the screen, what we have is we have data that is pertaining to a certain loan or certain loans taken by customers. Information like loan amounts, information like how long have people taken loan for, what's the interest rate, why have people taken loans, and so on. These are kind of standard, right? So imagine when you go to take a loan to a banker, that person is going to ask you, hey, how much of a loan do you want? And you say maybe $500,000. then he'll ask you, okay, what's the purpose of the loan? Maybe you say, hey, I want to buy it. I want a loan because I'm buying a condominium. Now, along with that information, what they would also ask you is, tell me about yourself. And that's where we have some demographic information about customers, right? We need to, or they need to know things like, where do we work? What do we work as, right? How much do we earn as an annual income, right? Because if we earn less, then we might be given a lower loan amount. If we earn more, we might be given a higher loan amount. Then, do we already own a house? Do we have some assets? How long have you been working for? Where do you stay? So on and so forth, right? Along with that, they could also get other information from you, like, how long have you been with the bank? Have you been transacting very frequently? Have you had any criminal offenses in the past? You might, ask, how do all these things help? And you would have filled this across many forms, right? This helps because data, as you know, is very valuable in talking to an organization about, how that customer is, whether giving a loan to this customer is going to be profitable for the bank or not. So in order to do that, what people would do, or what analysts like you would now do, is take this data, try to understand it. And the way you would understand it is to start exploring. Now, how do you explore? You would use features of Excel and maybe put together a few charts, a few business problems, a few business solutions, and then come up with something like a small report, which I'm just going to populate on the screen for you all to see, right? Now, let's say you put this up, all right? Let's say you know how to do it and you put this up. And then what this starts helping you with is to understand, number one, who are the people that are taking loans from this financial institution? Should I be worried about a certain group of people? Are there any particular days of the month where people are not taking loans, for example, right? You can see from a report like this, a very simple one I might add, that we have a very high level summarized view of some of these things, like how much of loan has been taken, how much has not been paid back, why are people taking loans, things like how's the trend of the loans like, and you can see that, okay, there is a group of people who are kind of late in paying back certain loans. So are these my target group of people who I should be careful about, right? You can see where they're taking it from. How does this help? Now you can station your next marketing campaign at a particular place. Now, although this is a map of the US, you can imagine if it's done within Singapore, then you have different zones and different regions where you can focus your marketing efforts. You can have, certain demographics targeted, and you can also interact with the data to know more, right? You can know, things like who owns a house, right? Who's on mortgage, who's, staying on rent, and how does that affect, at the end of the day, the bank's ability to satisfy these people or to help these people, right? Now, along with doing these things, which is part of exploring the data, what maybe your job role might also be is to help the bank understand, hey, I have information from 1st to 10th March, but I need to be prepared for the next 3 days, right? Because if people are coming to take loans from me, I need to know how much liquid cash I should have in order to give out loans, right? And that's where, tools like Excel have small capabilities to do things like forecasting, for example, where if they have a bunch of data, it will allow you to use a tool like forecasting to plan out, right? To plan out, hey, over the next 3 days, so if you look at this table or the chart, over the next 3 days, how much of loans do I need to keep as liquid cash in the bank in order to give it out, right? So this is part of making predictions to help you plan, right? So having the know-how of how to do this and what the data tells you is a very, very good combination, because now you have an upper hand of giving the organization more value out of the data, right? And what I'm showing you here is a very small example, mind you, right? When you start learning this, when you start putting it into action, there's going to be a lot more to it than you just see here. That's the first example, right? So banks can benefit, financial institutions can benefit largely by just, and it can even be small, financial institutions like microfinance institutions. They can benefit largely by adopting a tool and being able to analyze data using that. It's not only the loans department, it can be consumer banking, it can be credit, it can be anything else, right? Now, having said that, let's try to look at the second example that I stated about earlier, which is to now say that, okay, now you as an organization are empowering people to learn more than just Excel, right? You are empowering people to try and understand how I can get more value out of my data. I want to use business intelligence to figure out what my data is telling me even further. To do that, Power BI is one of those tools which can help, right? Now, okay, just before I go to Power BI, just stepping back to Excel here. Now, if you notice, as Excel has progressed over the past few years, right? Things have started to evolve even in the tool. That's why I said it all starts from the organization to empower the people. If you are stuck, let's say at Excel 2010, you're 10 years or 11 years back in time, then that's a problem because technology is evolving. And today in Excel, you have the ability to use things within the tool. Like, if you see here, even though it's grayed out, if you select the right data, it'll give you the ability to do things like forecasting, ability to do things like what if analysis. And these are things that you learn as you start using the technology more, right? Going into the second example, assume that you are part of a retail institution, right, which is utilizing data in order to help the organization or help the retail organization understand a bit more about the sales of the organization, right? Now, let me just make this full screen. All right. Now, if you see here within the data, what we have are information about, number one, customers. So you can see, where people are from, for example. You have information about, let's say, different products being offered by the retail institution, different categories of products that they offer. So be it, let's say, phones, be it, machines, be it furniture, storage, and so on. And then you have an information about the actual sales that have been done from the organization. Now, what is the most important thing for any retail organization to know? They should know, hey, is my product selling? Is there something I need to take off the shelf? And so on, right? Now, imagine you walking into a Fair Price or Shenxiong or any supermarket, right? You will notice that in any supermarket, things which are kept in a certain order, right? For example, at the counter, you'll see, okay, there are some chocolates or there are certain things which people tend to just, pick up, right? Because they think that they need it, even though they might not. Now, if you think that's a coincidence that that item is there, then again, it's not a coincidence. It's because it has been analyzed that if you keep this object there, there's a higher chance people will pick it up. And how would you know that? By doing analysis of the data. And the next time you go to a store, try to just think about what I said. And then, you'll be like, hey, I heard this somewhere. Maybe it's true, right? So these are things which you might not know, but it's there. Now, the same thing for e-commerce as well, right? You go to Shopee, Lazada, Amazon, you try and buy something. It always shows you things that you think you might need as a recommendation. And many of the times you might end up even buying it, right? But it might not actually be something that's a requirement. So that's what organizations tend to do. They tend to understand what people are buying, where people are buying things from, and then they try to make their organizations better based on these things. So for example, let's say with the data we have, what an organization is trying to understand from here is they're trying to understand how, by looking at the sales, they can make certain process changes within the organization. They can promote certain things better within the organization, right? Now, what this organization has been seeing using this particular tool and by putting out this report is that they see that over the past few years, there has been a rise in sales, right? There has been a rise in sales. Now, this was the what, right? What is happening? There's a rise in sales. Now, what organizations want to try and understand further is why there is a rise in sales, right? And that's where sometimes a tool comes in handy, right? Because what it can try to do is behind the scenes, it can try to crunch some numbers and it can try to tell you why there is a possible rise in sales or why there is a possible decrease in sales. So assume you're an analyst, right, working for this retail organization. Now you would want to know this reason as well. So you do some magic, for example, and the tool allows you to get a very high level glimpse of, hey, one of the reasons why there is a rise in sales from 2012 to 2013 is possibly because these particular countries or these particular places contributed more in their purchase of sales, in their purchase of different products, right? Then what you will also see, for example, is that over those 2 years, there has been a rise in sales of certain product categories like tables, phones, chairs, and so on, right? These are things that are contributing to the why this increase. And a similar, question can be answered if there's a decrease as well. Now, although this might not give you the complete picture of everything, it can still help you answer some questions, right? Now, at the same time, what it can also help you do, it can help you see things like, hey, which categories of products have sold more? Where have they sold more, right? It can help you understand within those categories, which are the different products that have made further sales. So all these are things which can help you do a better job as an analyst and can help you become or take decisions from the data better. Now, imagine I tell you, hey, I want you to look at this and tell me what's going on, right? Now, it might be very difficult for you to do that, right? You might not be able to say, hey, this is very black and white. I can't just figure out looking at this. And that's why you need analytics to help you, number one, build something like this. Secondly, derive something from this, right? Now, the question is, why are you talking about a second tool, right? Maybe that's what you'll ask. Now, the reason why I'm talking about a second tool is because, this tool can be complementary to what you do in Excel by giving you a little more flexibility of interaction, right? Where I can interact with the visuals better. I can do analysis better. If I want to look at a particular category, I can look at it more in depth. So, these are things which allow me to say, okay, now I need maybe another tool to complement what I'm already looking at. And that's where this comes in. Now, these are tools that organizations adopt in order to help them understand data better. Well, the gap in using tools, okay, and maybe I'm partially biased because that's how I've been working. But some of the gaps with using tools is that whatever happens is is like a black box, right? You don't really know how certain things are happening. For example, if there's a forecast, you might not know how it's happening. You don't have full control over it. Now, if organizations require that, hey, I want to do something much more deeper and I want to have full control of doing something like that, that's where they start diving into a programming tool, right? And that's where Python, for example, comes into play, or R, or any other programming language comes into play. Now, a programming language is not very, very difficult to pick up, right? If you start, you'll pick it up. It's like learning ABC, right? Just a little more difficult than ABC. But what it allows you to do after that, it gives you the flexibility of being able to manipulate the data in a very flexible way. So you have full control over things. So I'm just going to show you the third small case of if I were to use programming, right? If I, as an analyst, were to use programming and I was told, hey, figure out who are the people that are potentially going to leave this telco operator and go to somebody else. How would I do it? Now, I'm not going to deep dive into the code, but what I'm going to possibly do is I'm going to show you a glimpse of the steps which can contribute towards doing this, right? Now, programming is like English to a certain extent, right? The reason I say that is because let's start looking at the steps, then you'll understand. Now, assume that the business problem is that I want to make a data-driven prediction of who are the customers that are going to churn from this telco operator. Now, the first thing I need is some data. Now, my data sources can be, again, as I said, Excel, it could be SQL, it could be any other, right? And I am going to try and get data into my Python environment, right? And you see, there are some words which look very, very English-like to you. It says, I want to read a CSV file, right? I mean, because it says, I want to read a CSV file, that's exactly what it's going to do. And it's going to get you some information on who is the customer, then whether the customer has any partners, dependents, what kind of value-added services are they using, how long do they spend talking, do they have subscription to streaming services, so on and so forth. There's a bunch of information which you can gather about a customer from a telco operator. The next thing to understand is a little bit more about the data. That's where exploring the data comes into play. And then you could use a programming language to do some simple plots, like put up some charts, like an analysis to understand, hey, how many people do I have who have left in the past? How many people are currently there? And that gives you a better understanding of who are the customers or what's the data you're dealing with, right? Now, going further, what you could do is you could use this data, which is, let's say, data that you have, which is historical data, to create or to train something that can help you make these predictions. Now, the reason you can train something is because you have information about who's left before. You have information about who's not left and what are the different parameters, what's the demographic information. It's like our brain learning, right? And that's how Python can create something that can learn as well. And this something is what we call machine learning or a machine learning model, right? So once you're able to do that, then you're able to say, once you have trained that, hey, for a customer who is not a senior citizen, for example, who does not have any dependents, whose monthly charges are around $116, who uses online security services, who has online backup services, device protection services, he is somebody who would not potentially move from this telco organization and go somewhere else, right? This is the insight that you can get, and you have full control over how this is derived. So these things can be enabled via programming, and learning programming helps you get this out. Hence the two tracks, one which is a non-programming based track, the other which is a programming based track. Now, I'm going to go back to my presentation from here to continue. So how this helps is that it helps organizations decide based on their capability and their people's capability where they want to go, right? Do they want to take a tool-based track? Do they want to employ a programming-based track, right? Everything has its benefits, and organizations can kind of embark on either one of those directions. Now, the question is, knowing that these are things organizations are going towards or they're starting to embark on, what is the future of analytics, right? Where are we headed? How do we start, right? And how do we proceed if we have started? Now, one of the things that data analytics is enabling organizations to do is reducing the human error and increasing the human accuracy, right? And over the years, that's what we have progressed to do. So if you look at this illustration here, it clearly tells you that over a period of time, our error has decreased because we have started using tools, we have started using technologies and methods to deal with the data more efficiently, right? And our aim, or an organization's aim, is to adopt analytics to help reach a stage where your error is minimized, right? And your accuracy is maximized as much as possible. And that's what we are trying to gun towards. Now, to do this, Gartner has said that there are certain trends that that are happening or that are becoming very popular in 2021 and beyond that would help lay the foundation for this, or provide an acceleration to this. So some of them are listed on the screen for you here, and I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of what it says. So the trends that are being adopted by organizations today are mainly for three different things. Number one is to accelerate change, and that's where you start using tools, technologies, data layers, or data management tools and techniques in order to provide kind of a foundation level for analytics to happen, right? The second thing is they're trying to operationalize business value by improving experience, engineering different, decision intelligence and business intelligence, and provisioning data analytics as a core business function, right? And it could be part of finance, it could be part of legal, it could be part of logistics, but it's also becoming a core business function. And also to start using technologies to distribute things like the cloud technology, like IoT devices and so on and so forth. They're becoming very, very pervasive in the industry today. So if we talk about the industrial revolution that is happening, banks are moving towards bank 4.0 or even 5.0 today, where you have all digital all digital use functions, be it mobile, be it digital, KYC, be it cashless, onboarding, so on. You see the process becoming seamless. You have cybersecurity becoming a very big part of it. You have AI and machine learning again, which is part and parcel of data analytics, which is becoming very useful for fraud, compliance, legal, and so on. Ultimately, who it affects is the customer, right? It's you, right? You're getting a better experience, and the organizations are becoming smarter. If we talk about retail industry, right? The retail industry since the 1950s, the 1960s has changed quite a fair bit, right? You see here that retail started a long time back, and the first shopping mall was in 1954 in Michigan. If we talk about the US, came up. Post that, when we started changing the model to look at retail, we said people shouldn't go to retail. The retail should come to the people. And that's where we are at this stage of belonging, or era of belonging, where we're using digital technologies to bring about convenience, customer service, trust, and so on, right? And that's what is kind of becoming the change that is driving analytics to help in this process. If you talk about education as well, right? Education is changing. We had education 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Today we're at 4.0, where it's all innovation-based education, right? We're looking at what people want using analytics. How do people want to learn, right? And hence, we are creating new systems, we are creating new we're creating new courses and new technologies to monitor and help people learn better, right? And as part of education 4.0, you have learning 4.0 as a subset. And this is one small example of an LMS system, which is helping understand people better in order to kind of revolutionize the way people learn through, analyzing their emotions, their profile, their feedback, their audio, and so on, and giving learning and education a different experience using analytics and digital technologies, right? Now, all this is part of going towards Industry 4.0 and 5.0 beyond, right? We are at a stage where we are using systems which are driven not mechanically, but more digitally. We are using products which are driven more digitally as well. And all this leads to being able to collect more data, being able to analyze people better, things better, provide a better solution, right? Now, in terms of being able to adopt this for organizations, right? Because it's a very important question. How does one go about adopting this? Now, before going into that, before going into why and how you should adopt it, it's been said that any organization or anybody who is adopting analytics, it's always been helpful to them. It's never been said that, okay, if you do analytics, it's not going to be helpful, or it'll make you worse. That's never happened. So there have been a lot of reports and surveys over the years that have said that at large, the usage of analytics in the industry has only helped, right? And it's also said that organizations adopting this data-driven culture, right, they are more likely to acquire customers, more likely to have, people backing them up, more likely to retain their clients and become more profitable, right? And also that, beyond 2020 and 2021, there'll be a lot of opportunities created in the industry for analytical roles. And that's what we are seeing, right? We're seeing a lot of roles coming up in this digital space. So the question is, where do organizations start so that they can become more mature in the pyramid of data analytics? It all starts at the bottom, right? Maturing as a data-driven organization first requires the organization to study and understand how they can set up digital systems and infrastructure. From there, they can start doing simple things like using Excel to analyze the data collected by the systems. Beyond that, they can start experimenting with various other tools to see how more they can leverage on analytics and how further it can be profitable for their business. And beyond that, you're starting to just dive more and more deeper into different services, governance, and so on, to kind of make the whole process very seamless for an organization. Now, even though this seems like a 5-step process, in terms of time, it's not 5 days or 5 months. It could literally take a few years for organizations to drive up this value chain. How does it accelerate? It accelerates if the people are better prepared, right? So in terms of what you should, as an individual should adopt, right? It could be one or more of these things, right? Like programming, like databases, like the math, like machine learning, natural language processing, data science. And as much as this slide says start and finish, there is really no start and there is really no finish, right? It all depends on the need of the hour, what you're capable of, and what you should be doing to make your role as an individual and at the workplace beneficial, right? So that's how individuals can carve their way into data analytics, right? So if you learn analytics, you would be able to do good things, right? Things which are more standard, things which are more beneficial for the organization. Build, good looking reports, do good analytics. But if you don't, and if you say, you know what, I'm just going to do things without having the knowledge, even though my organization is not very, very data driven, I'm going to put something together, you'll end up with a disaster, right? Something which nobody can understand, nobody can see, nobody can read. And I'm keeping this up on for a few seconds for you to realize that this is actually an extract from a news channel, and you can see what people who don't know how to put up things can put it up like, and you don't want to be one of those. So before concluding and just opening it up for Q&A, I'd just like to summarize by saying that, number one, you have the opportunity to pick up these courses through NTUC Learning Hub. You can look at different courses to get yourself upskilled in things like analytics, Excel, Python, Power BI, R, and so on. And you'll get an opportunity to, obviously leverage on a lot of industrial use cases in order to learn these things. And secondly is that, when we talk about smart nation, when we talk about the topic of the day, which is data analytics for a smart nation, it's again very important to know that a smart nation can be driven only by organizations and people, right? The government can take initiatives, yes, but in order to be able to fulfill those, it's all of us, right? And analytics is a tool at the end of the day. Remember, it's like a screwdriver, right? You use screwdriver to screws into something, right? Analytics is a tool to drive that screw into data, extract meaningful things for you to take decisions or to fix something. That's all. All it requires is you to learn, get up to skill, and be impact the organization in a positive way. So I think with that, thank you for listening to me. I think it was wonderful talking to all of you. I'm going to open the floor now to questions, and I'm going to try to answer the questions